Good evening, everybody. Uh, Welcome to this session on teaching and learning methods. Uh, Teaching has been a topic of interest to me for many decades, in fact. And during my training, I really had very little interest in learning about teaching itself, even though I was a tutor in the university where I worked in the UK. uh, I went through the motions of teaching like most others would do, learning and seeing others teach, and learning from there and doing what I could do to the best of my ability. But then when I came back here, I was involved with one Dr. Srinivas, the Rajiv Gandhi University, where I volunteered as one of the members for their curriculum cell, curriculum development cell. And that's when I actually started reading and learning about teaching and learning. And it's amazing how much science there is behind this whole concept of teaching and learning. And like it was my initial experience, you find that most of us, students or teachers, are not even aware of the science and the vastness of knowledge that is there behind the concept of learning and teaching. So I'm going to just scratch the surface of this vast body of knowledge and touch upon some principles of learning, explain the tools available, and see how you choose any of these tools. It is important to know these things because that is the only way we can have effective teaching and effective learning. That's two important things that, if you want to be a good student, you need to know how best to teach. And if you want to really teach well, you must know how best people learn. So it's imperative that we understand how we teach and learn. And what is very important in this aspect is also the way one assesses one's knowledge or skill. And I'm not even touching that in this because it's a subtopic or a sub chapter by itself, and that perhaps deserves another talk sometime, if at all right. We must understand that learning occurs at different levels: surface learning, deep learning, and strategic. Most school kids will be learning at surface level. There, you're afraid that you fail, and so you perform. And that's not what we expect from postgraduates in surgery, for example. There, you're really looking at a minimum of deep level of learning and almost always a strategic learning, where there's a desire to succeed and compete, not necessarily with the rest of the world, but yourself, and to give out your best. And that is what we always look at when we talk about strategic learning, so that you are perhaps the best, you're giving out your best to your patients and achieving the best results. And so your aim must be well beyond passing exams, or just getting by as another surgeon, but to excel in your field. And that's the important thing. So as I said, your aim and my aim would be at this stage. I include my aim because we are all lifelong learners. It's often said, but not really followed in spirit. But we must always endeavor to understand and undertake this job of learning as a phenomenon that occurs throughout one's life, one's working life at least. I suppose I would stop learning surgery the day I stop doing surgery, and that's possible. But other than that, during your working career, even well after you pass your exams, your DNB or your MS or whatever, you will be learning. And I can tell you for sure that my own learning, and I'm sure most of my colleagues will vouch for it, our learning of surgery actually increased, and in fact exponentially increased after we got our exams, and not before that. So I make the point that an exam is an important phase of one's life, but it's a very, very transient, relatively unimportant phase, which you won't realize at this point in time because you haven't got it yet. But the moment you get your exam and then you get on to the job of being a consultant surgeon, you will notice that your way you learn, the way you do things will be entirely different. And that's a very important thing. Now, we are all adults, and we have what GANs are learning is the adult learning principle. And the principle is that the learning is perceived as relevant. It has to be participatory, where all of you participate, and it is focused on issues. Just give me just half a second, please. I'll mute myself for half a second. Sorry about that interruption. So, as I said, adult learning principles, where it is perceived as relevant, it is participatory, and it is focused on issues. And these are very, very important issues. The reason I say that is that when you look at the teaching program that we have kept for you in our group, all these things are already built in. Whether you noticed it or not earlier, I do not know, but all the topics are relevant. It's always participatory, and it is focused on certain issues which are very, very important for you as a surgeon, as a practicing surgeon. And the role of the teacher is one of being a facilitator. It's not that we give you didactic teaching, that we give you notes, perhaps in your high school, in your college, perhaps even in the medical school, undergraduate level, perhaps you are exposed to notes that teachers would give, or read books called, lecture notes in surgery or something, which was very popular, I remember. So those days are really gone. At the postgraduate level, you learn yourself, and the job of your teacher is to guide you to discover knowledge. And the way it works is that if you discover it yourself, rather than our spoon feeding it, you will retain it much better. And if you keep looking at the technical terms used for teaching and learning, pedagogy is the term used where, say, school level learning, the term covers all the aspects of teaching, like the teaching materials, the methods, the audio visual, everything, where it is teacher oriented. The teacher decides what the student should know, and he controls everything. Andragogy is adult learning, the thing that I just mentioned, where in fact it is the learner who decides what it is, and the teacher is a facilitator in that. So what we do at the postgraduate level is andragogy, and it has now been superseded by heutagogy. This is a term I read fairly recently, I must say, less than a month ago. What is interesting here is that it has come about because technology has changed the way we learn and we see things, we perceive things. It's become a huge thing now. Things that come on YouTube, come on social media, on WhatsApp and things like that. We lightly talk about WhatsApp University, but in fact it is a great medium where, if people are serious, some very serious and very good knowledge can be exchanged. And learning has become a lot less formal. It's not a classroom anymore. When we started learning on the net, for example, on a Zoom platform, that in fact completely tilted the stress away from a classroom. And now you don't even need a Zoom. You have so many other things that happen, where perhaps a teacher only has to direct a student to say where the information is available. Rest of it is picked up by the student himself. And so actually, a time may come when there will be very little lectures like what I'm giving now, and most of what the teacher does is perhaps share links and references and does only assessment. That will probably be the role of a teacher in the years to come. Learning is always by experience. This is something we must always understand. That's probably why you need these conventional tools, in spite of the heutagogy that we talked about. If you sit by yourself, do everything, the learning will be less effective. Why is it? Because it is a feeling and an experience, and there has to be reflective observation, and then you have to think about it. And this thinking then leads to doing. And when you do this, feeling, watching, thinking, and doing all alone, as contrasted to doing it in a group where you exchange ideas, when you exchange the thinking process, when you're exposed to another mind thinking along with yours, the teaching will be much, much better. And so there'll always be teaching or learning is never an individual experience. It'll always be some kind of a group experience. And we all know this, that if you hear something, you forget it very soon. If you see something which is concrete, an image, an operation, or a photograph or a video, you understand. When you actually do it, you understand it even better. And that's when you retain it the most. And this is an important slide in my view. And, if you really look at it, learning can be either passive or active. And active learning is actually what is most effective. As you say, 90% of what we say and do. So if you talk about an operation that you're doing it and you actually do it, you'll remember it the best. At the end of 2 weeks, you'll probably remember 90% of it. If you're just talking the theory part of it, but you have done all the reading and you're giving the seminar, you'll remember about 70% of it. But just see what's happening. If you're just hearing the words like I'm saying now, you sit and talk, you listen to a lecture, at the end of 2 weeks, you'll remember only 20% of what I have said today. That's very, very true. And if I don't make it pictorial, and if I have just slides and things that are going there, then you'll have only about 30% of what we see. So retention is a function of actually doing things. And that is why I keep saying that all lectures are there to stimulate you to look deeper into a subject. You have to put the effort, go in and read it yourself. And please note that the present habit of some of our youngsters, where they read something on the net, copy paste it onto a slide, and then give a seminar, is not going to work at all. You're not going to retain any of it. What you really need to do is read something on the net, nothing wrong in that. Make sure it's a good peer-reviewed article, understand what it says, and put that information in your own words on a slide. And the slide must be only phrases or points which must be pointers to what you have to say. Only when you go through this formal exercise will you really learn and retain the subject. The other important thing is to know that there are two different ways of learning, that sequential and non-sequential. Now, if you look at gallstones, for example, if you look at the pathophysiology of gallstones, the pathology of gallstones, its complications, its diagnosis and treatment in a sequential manner, like it is given in a textbook, that's one way of learning. You do learn a little bit. Yes, I'm not saying you don't learn anything. But what is even more effective in terms of learning and in terms of retaining the issues that you have learned is the non-sequential learning. What do we mean by that? You don't talk about gallstones, okay? You talk about right upper quadrant pain. It's the same subject or a similar subject, much wider and non-sequential. So you talk about differential diagnosis of right upper quadrant pain. One of them is gallstones. Straight away jump to how do you diagnose gallstones? What is your differential diagnosis? How do you differentiate that from a liver abscess, from a duodenal ulcer, from a kidney stone? That's differential diagnosis. You learn about that, and then you jump to surgery. What are the points in surgery that are important? That are important? What are the things you're going to do? And when you're doing that, switch back to anatomy of the gallbladder and the variations in the biliary tree. You see the trend? So when you are non-sequentially learning a topic, which is best seen in things like quizzes and MCQs, then you will learn a lot and retain it better than in sequential learning. And one up on this, at about the same level, is again problem-oriented learning. Instead of just learning about gallstones, you jump into somebody with a right upper quadrant pain. Look at all aspects of the diseases. And then apart from gallstones, you learn about other things also: hepatitis, hepatic abscess, pancreatitis, the DU, whatever, basal pneumonia, all of it. It's a problem-oriented learning. So when you look at it in a wide fashion and zero in on differentiating one from the other, that's when you really learn a lot. And unfortunately, even though this was, described long ago, it has never taken on. And I, for one, would love to have a situation where most of our learning would be problem-oriented learning. Now, come to the conventional tools proper. We're now having understood somewhat about what the science behind learning is. We need to now look at the conventional tools. Of course, when we say conventional tools, there'll always be non-conventional tools, and I'll talk a little bit about it at the end of this talk. These conventional tools can be seen as control-based, size-based, or domain-based. Okay, before we go into the details, can I now take a little break and ask if you have any questions or doubts, please? All right. Any comments so far?
No, sir.
No. Niranjan, you have anything to add?
Nothing, sir. It's
Nothing.
going.
Nishant?
Nothing to add, sir.
Nothing to add. Okay. I'll make you Nishant, I'll make you one sec. I'll make you a co-host. If somebody is there's a disturbance, please mute them. Yeah. Yeah, somebody was saying something, please.
Sir,
Yeah, go on. Hey, Ravi, please tell me. Unmute yourself, Ravi. Yeah.
see, you are saying about the futuristic teaching will be just giving them leads and maybe giving them the websites to which they should refer to and things, which is already happening in the United States. My son says
Yeah.
that the teaching is all about taking responsibility. They just give you pointers and they say this is the direction you may need to go.
Correct.
And they have a review meeting every 2 or 3, 4 days, sometimes once a week,
Yes.
depending on the subject or the research, what they are doing.
Yeah.
And then they have to take all the responsibility, do all the work, and then whatever difficulties they are facing, suggestions and improvements which the teachers will do. I think that is actually very good. I think what Einstein said, that the ideal teacher provides an conducive environment for the students to learn. I think that is ideal.
Absolutely. So as we're talking, the conventional tools can be considered under three major headings. One of them is control based, the other is size of the class based, and the domain based. Control, I think it should always be student controlled. Even now, I think in our own setup, it is more teacher controlled than student controlled, but I would like it to be more and more student controlled. Size, large group, small group, individual assignments and reading and things like that, it's self-explanatory. We are pretty much okay about what we're doing with a small group because ours is a small group. Domain based, the only thing to describe here is that knowledge, cognitive skill as it is called, is what we normally do in a class or whatever is related to a class. Skill is something which is mostly learned in the OT for us or in a dry lab. And as you said, we have had a skill, basic skills course, which we did for the newcomers. So that's where you demonstrate and you have simulation and things. But something that we at the moment are not doing in a big way, but which is again important, is this attitude or ethics based. Ethics is something which we don't formally teach, but you learn by imbibition, by looking at the way your seniors behave in difficult and different and difficult clinical situations, in terms of communication, in terms of conveying bad news, in terms of explaining complications and things like that. Perhaps we could increase a little more of our role play, which is underutilized in our standard teaching programs. Now, we'll go and look at each one of these and see the various tools that we normally use. These are all conventional tools. And let's look at the lecture first. It's obviously a big group, large group activity. It can also be for small groups. I will let you read and understand the advantages, but focus on some of the disadvantages. One of the biggest disadvantages for the lecture, I think, is no learner involvement. We keep saying that you must read up and come, but hardly any person reads. And to be a good lecturer needs a bit of skill, communication skills, your body language, your language skills itself. You must be fluent in the language that you're talking. And so it's a bit of a challenge if the teacher himself doesn't have a free flow. And please note that in a class, people have different rates of learning. And if you sort of tailor your class to the middle person, the median, or the guy who's in the middle of this range, the slow learners will still not learn, and the fast learners will find it too slow, and they're disengaged, they're unenthusiastic. So that's one of the biggest problems in this. But nevertheless, because it is a time honored and time tested tool, we use it quite often. Bedside clinics are very, very important, but there are certain real disadvantages. It can only be for a small group, and particularly in private hospitals, even in teaching hospitals, government hospitals, privacy is an issue. We have to respect the patient, and in a private practice, and private teaching schools, that's a big issue. And for across the board, for patients, it can be a physical and a mental stress when you actually discuss their case, standing next to them. And I think even in government hospitals, everywhere at all, we should not do any discussion in front of the patient. I think we should just, if at all we are using such a facility, we must see the patient, just look at the physical findings, and correct the student in the methodology of doing the clinical test, and get away from the patient, sit in a private room, and then discuss what you have to do. So at the most, you're looking at demonstration of physical science. And I think the way we are doing now, where even in big gatherings we have patients, in our RRC, or in our Hanumaya lecture series, for example, where we discuss things in front of the patient. That is something which I personally would like to avoid. A symposium is actually derived from the Greek word drinking party. It refers to a drinking party, but for us it is an academic exercise, and you have an exchange of ideas. And what it does is, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, it's known that you cannot keep a person's attention for more than 20 minutes. So if I give a talk like this for an hour, I know that, after the first 20 minutes, it's very, very difficult to, retain one's attention, the audience's attention. So a symposium is a good way of getting over that problem, because you have several speakers talking on different aspects of the same subject, for example. And all of them are different. Their styles will be different. Their presentations will be different. So you have, 4 or 5 chunks of 15 minutes each. And that way you get over the problem of, continuous talking and didactic lecturing where people's attention is lost. And of course, with a good moderator, you can have discussion. And the real requirement there, which sometimes is lacking, is a skilled moderator. I really have been in several symposia, and I found that the moderator has lost the trend, as it were. And so you find that even that becomes a very boring, monotonous 4 or 5 lectures where there is no discussion. And at this point in time, I always felt that people must have training in moderating, and that is something that all of us teachers must get together and learn to do. And there is a science behind moderating, and on another day at another platform we could even discuss that. Well, I say it is resource intensive because you have to identify the right kind of people for the symposium. You have to divide the subject in such a way that there is no overlap, and then get them to send you the slides well in time for you as a moderator to moderate, to make sure that there is no overlap. And at the same time, make sure that all aspects that have to be mentioned have been mentioned in the symposium on a given topic, I mean. So it is quite a job for the moderator to do, and you really need a skilled moderator to have that. Can I take a break here again and invite comments, please, and questions, if any? All right, let me put it to Ravi. What do you think you would do as a moderator in a symposium, Ravi? You're doing one in February. Yeah.
I think, as you said, first thing is to identify good people so that the message is conveyed well. and select the topics. And I think probably leave the choice of the topics to the speakers, because they will know what is there in the particular heading, subheadings, what their interest lies in. And so, that they will be able to speak well on the topic that they like.
Yeah.
So that is one thing. And I think to also to maybe have a meeting before the symposium itself, to understand what they are likely to convey, and probably nudge them in the direction that you need to go if you
Right.
think that they are veering from the topic.
All right.
And also provide, I think, provide a good platform for discussion. And in this way, I think, get questions from the audience, and make sure that all doubts are cleared, so that at the end of the symposium there is a good take home message regarding the particular topic that has been discussed
Very
in
true.
I think that's the main thing, I
Very
think.
true. But I think audience involvement is something that I would give a lot of importance to. So on the symposia that I have moderated, I always tell them that the audience must be asking questions. I leave the floor open, and also encourage them to differ from what experts have to say. What happens is very few people want to air if they feel there is something that's different. But I encourage them to do that. Nishant, your hand is up. Go on,
Sir,
Nishant.
would it be better if the moderator actually tells the speaker, this is what I wanted to talk about at the beginning only, so that we can save a lot of time?
Yeah, that's a good idea, because what I have always done is, apart from dividing the given topic, I also give 3 or 4 subheadings, as it were, to say these are the topics that I would like you to cover. So that always goes with, when I have moderated, I always tell my symposium speakers that. And most of them usually stick to it, but sometimes they sort of overshoot. And as Ravi said, I will have insisted that they give me the slides well in advance, and I will have time to generally correct it. And so there is no real overlap or controversy on the day the symposium is given. That's an important thing. Excuse me. Now, panel discussion. I think we'll have to ask some of the youngsters, what do you think is the difference between a panel discussion and a symposium? Abdul.
Sir, there'll be a group of intellects who will, there'll be a panel, sir, panel of experts.
Mm-hmm.
And then there'll be a discussion based on one for and one against it.
Yeah, you got it almost right, but can you explain it a bit better? The difference between panel discussion and symposium. Symposium also has a group of experts, right?
Exactly.
Nishant?
Sir, symposium is where they come prepared with lectures, they give a talk, and the discussion is for a very short time at the end, where they either briefly sum up or they take questions.
Right.
Panel discussion, I think, is like the moderator puts up a question and it's like a debate.
Yeah.
For and against, and what would you do in this particular scenario?
That is correct. In the sense, panel discussion is always about a controversial or a debatable issue. Okay. And if you saw Ravi do one of those in a state conference, for example, we talked about AWR versus something else, right, Ravi?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a debatable issue. And so you have both in symposia and panel discussion, you have experts. There's no doubt about it. But for this topic of discussion can be just a topic like AWR itself. That will be a symposium on AWR. But if you're going to raise debatable issues, AWR versus something, okay, then you call it a panel discussion. And so it's always a controversial and a debatable issue. And again, it is driven by the moderator. It's very, very important that the moderator frames the right kind of questions. That's what brings out the best among the panelists. And he should, and many times, even expert panelists tend to beat around the bush. And so you need to have a strong moderator who pins them down and says, look, Give me yes or no answer to this. Or is this what you're saying? That kind of a thing. It is a skill where you should not be seen to be aggressive and rude, but at the same time, you cannot be very soft and let people get away with roundabout answers. And the real problem there is that when people are not stopped, they dilate on things in a very tangential manner, and the flow of the program goes away. And so it is important again that you need a skilled moderator, and that is not an easy commodity to find in the academic circles. A lot of planning is required, because apart from everything else, it is not enough if the moderator just poses questions and keeps quiet. He has to give a take home message to the audience, and that message could be that there is no take home message. That's not wrong. For example, when I have done panel discussions, I have said the jury is still out. That's a word I always use. The jury is still out as to whether you should do operation A versus operation B, which means that the answers are not solidified yet. Okay. It can be as simple as the difference between IPOM and IPOM plus, for example, or use of intraperitoneal proline. The jury is still out. I don't think there's any question about that. So what is important in a panel discussion is that you debate. It's a debatable issue, and it is very important that the moderator plans and executes the flow of the program. That's an important thing. Okay, group discussion is something which is one of my favorites, because if people come prepared for it, that is the big disadvantage here. Most of us don't read about it. We don't come prepared. And so we get stuck in mundane aspects. We don't even look at the depth. We're scratching the surface. We haven't found the answers. And so the discussion is not, worth the while. But if people come prepared, then you can have a lot of interaction. And because people are interacting, because they are actively contributing to the body of knowledge by way of, speaking or verbalizing what they know, there's a lot of interaction. There's a lot of retention. We understand and retain what we understand for a long, long time in group discussions. That is an important tool, and we should use it more often and more effectively. Role play, as I said, is something which we hardly do at all. Maybe we should start doing it. Usually for ethics, this is one of the things. Ethics, communication, and all that. And you can. I and Nishant did some teaching exercises on the video recently for one of the organizations, and we had a role play. And some of our students here, I think Indraja and Pavan were also there. So, okay, Indraja, you tell me, how did you find the role play? Are you there?
I don't think so.
She's not
She's
there.
not there.
Pavan there? Is Pavan there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you were there at the role play, right? When we were.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. What did you think of it?
Sir, role play means so. If you take one example like consent, so before.
No, I know. I'm just asking, what did you think of it? Did you think it was a useful exercise? Was it comfortable, uncomfortable? Was there learning in it? Was there no learning in it? Be candid, be honest.
It's a comfortable and learning exercise, sir.
You found it useful. Yeah. So generally role plays are quite useful. And what is important is that the teacher must put people at comfort. That's something that's important. He must learn to, we know that we're all play acting, for example. And so some people are uncomfortable with it, but you must learn to get comfortable. And the teacher has the responsibility of creating the kind of atmosphere where people are comfortable. And I must confess that I'm not one of the best teachers for this particular activity. I can't put people at ease. And so I sort of try to avoid it, give it to somebody else who can do it better than me. But by and large, I think we should encourage a little more of role play in our teaching. This is as far as cognitive learning is concerned, that is theory learning is concerned. But skill is a completely different ballgame altogether. All right. And I would strongly recommend that you guys look up this paper. in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2006. They recognize 3 stages of skill learning: cognition, integration, and automation. Very simple. You must first understand what is to be done. It could be a simple vertical mattress suture, it could be a gastrojejunal anastomosis, it could be whatever, a TEP, whatever. So understand what is to be done, understand the theory behind it, and the mechanics. The next step is to actually see from the expert what he does and do it yourself in a staged manner. A given task is cut down or broken down into several steps, like in laparoscopic suturing, for example, and you learn each of those individually and then stitch them together, put all of them together to complete the job of, say, as an example, laparoscopic suturing. That is integration. Then it becomes automation. When you keep performing it several times and practice it, and this is something which is very, very important. You have to practice. This is where a skills lab comes in very, very handy. You have to continue practicing there. You cannot practice it in the operation theater on a patient. It is time intensive, and most surgeons cannot give you the time that is required for it. So what you have to do is practice it in the lab. Your house could be your lab. Your chair, a seat can be your lab. It doesn't have to be somewhere formal in a hospital or in a college. So learn wherever you can, practice it, and then you can perform better in the operation theater. And as I said, any demonstration for us as surgeons happens most often in the operation theater. Okay. And you must have, of course, in a simulation, you will have mannequins and models and VR stations. We do not have VR stations in the labs that we have access to, but I'm told that Victoria Hospital has very good VR stations. And if you're interested, we could talk to people and get you an opportunity to use those VR stations. And we will certainly try and attempt that. In the willing patients part of it, usually in the outpatients, when patient is awake, you do small cases like sebaceous cysts or lipomas and things, then you would have to have willing patients take their permission and do it. And in my experience, even in private practice, people allow you to do it because they understand that teaching is a very noble kind of act, and that generation after generation have to be trained. Of course, if there is a patient who is a little reluctant or unwilling, there's no point in trying to put any kind of force on that person to accept. All right. We then come to a very interesting concept which is neglected by most people, which I believe is one of the most important tools. But the world doesn't seem to recognize logbook as a teaching tool. They use it as an assessment tool. There is no doubt about it. Everybody says, show me your logbook before we give you a pass or before you allow you to sit an exam, for example. Even in the FRCS, you have to have certain operations and listed in a logbook under your belt before you can write the exam. But is it a teaching tool? I firmly believe that it is a very, very good teaching tool for simple reasons. One, it gives you the discipline of documenting. And it's very important either in your work as a surgeon or as a researcher, as a clinical researcher. Documentation is very important. And it is, as I said, a great non-sequential learning tool. You put your case that you assisted or saw today and learn about it. Go home, read up about it. That's the best way you can learn surgery. I have absolutely no doubt about it. So you see how non-sequential it can be. You would have seen a sebaceous cyst. Next moment you see in the OPD, go to the operation theater, see a colectomy. That evening you see an accident and look at a compound fracture, for example. Any number of different cases fleet in and out of your life as a postgraduate student. And if you keep a logbook and then write notes about the questions that you may have had, doubts you may have had, difficulties that you may have had, you will find that, and then you go home and read up about it. If you don't find the answers in the books, perhaps talk to your seniors or your colleagues about it. If you do it this way, you will learn all of surgery in 3 years. There is absolutely no doubt about it. All right. But then if you have issues with numbers, number of cases that you're seeing, then that can be an issue. And as I keep saying, computer literacy is important because rather than a physical, written kind of logbook in a book, having a very mobile and interactive cloud-based Excel sheet, for example, or a Google sheet would be the most useful thing. But for that, you need a degree of computer literacy. And I believe that all of us have it in our group. Projects and assignments are actually the way to go. As Ravi mentioned earlier, all of the learning should be like this. We should, I think, just give you projects, tell you what are the references, and then our job as a teacher would be only to evaluate that project. All right, that is probably what's going to happen. And we have not had too much success in the previous years. Hopefully this year it will be a different story. We used to ask you to take one major question in the DNB exam and answer it and send the answers to us, and we would correct it. It had a very, very useful purpose, but somehow our students did not take to it very well, and we didn't want to push it too often. And I would be the one to really revive that. I think it's a good idea because it will help you write your answers in the exam. And also, please note that these answers must be handwritten, photographed, and sent to us by WhatsApp or email. If you type it in, it doesn't help because you must have the habit of that's the way you write your exams, right? So you must have the habit of writing these short essays that DNB expects. And of course, if they go the way of um, MCQs, and even that may go out of the window. But that, as of now, we still have the theory part of the DNB and the MS as essay questions, and so I think you should practice that. Before taking on to journal clubs, any comments or questions so far, please? Niranjan, you're very quiet. Say something.
Sir, nothing much, sir.
What do you think
Everything
about
you have covered.
what do you think of this answering the questions, DNB questions or MS questions?
It was an excellent idea, sir.
Right.
They would have got the experience of writing.
All right. So shall we try and revive it this time?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. What do you say, Pawan?
So that's a gun to the head question.
No gun, no gun, no gun, Pawan. It's a very, very innocent, very innocuous question. Do you think you want to do that, or you think it's too much work?
We want to do that, sir.
You want to do that, Nikita?
Yes, sir.
You want to do that, or is it too much work? Or do you already have too much work?
No, sir.
You want to
I
do
think
that?
it would be a very good exercise, sir,
All right,
actually.
all right. Let's try it
The,
out later.
the DNB has this, they have the once a year they do it.
Yeah.
And I actually, rather than correcting and giving marks, which is important,
Yeah.
but I sit down with the guys and everybody will be there. And for about half an hour to 45 minutes, I, give them a critique of what they have done right, what they have done wrong, how
Right.
I would approach it and things. I think it is a very useful exercise.
It is. It is. Do you
Yeah.
know that's how Tom Duncan taught us for our final FRCS questions?
Yeah.
Tom Duncan was my consultant, and we used to meet every Thursday evening, and each of us, the 10 of us who were sitting the exam, we would go with our, our answers to the main question, one main question each week, and he would sit there and correct it collectively. He would take all of us, make all of us read out our answers and collectively correct it. It was a very, very useful thing for us. Yeah. Okay. I will not dilate on the journal clubs because we have done it very often, and I'm sure our group particularly knows what it is. But if there are some people who are not in our group, who are in the audience, I'll give a very short view of what a journal club really should be. All right. You choose an original article, which is usually less than 2 years old. It should be clinically relevant from a good impact factor journal. Of course, sometimes far-reaching basic science articles can also be chosen. And the main purpose of a journal club is to learn to do critical appraisal. Critical appraisal, in short, is to know how good that design of a study is, how thorough the results have been, how thoroughly the results have been collated, how properly they have been analyzed, and are the conclusions really based on the results of that particular study. This is a critical appraisal, and it is again a group activity, and it is the job of the participant, the main person who does the journal club, to distribute the copies to all the participants in the club a week in advance so that they have time to study. And he prepares a PPT himself, giving the summary of the article of various phases, the aims, the methods, the results, the discussion, and the like. And he also gives his own critical appraisal, the good points and the not so good points of the study. And in the PPT, you give a gap between various phases, and then asks for a discussion. And each of the participants will come with his or her critical appraisal, and the presenter, along with, of course, with the guidance of the moderator, will give his version. And it is important that, again, we are not reduced to reading what the journal says. It is important for us to critically appraise it, evaluate how good it is. And for that, you need to have many cross references. That is an important thing to have. It's not that you read only that particular journal, but you also say, to put the results of that journal in context, in perspective, you need to have further reading of similar articles. And that is the primary responsibility of the presenter. And of course, the moderator will help them find such articles, because youngsters, when they're doing it, for the first or second or third time, may not be aware of the kind of article that they should be looking for. That's where the moderator's role comes in. Morbidity mortality meetings, I think, are again very, very useful. What is important is that it gives you a summary of the department's work for a given month, and you will have some complications. It is important that you recognize that surgery is a field with some complications. It could even be death. If some surgeon says, the saying goes, a very well-known saying goes, if a surgeon says that he doesn't have complications, either he's lying or he's not operating. It's as simple as that. But there's always things to learn from what we do. One of my consultants used to say that you learn a lot more from your failures or your complications than from your successes. And so in that context, the point of an M&M, a morbidity mortality meeting, is to learn from a complication that you might have faced and see how well we can face it if and when we are faced with a similar situation in the future. What is extremely important is that it is not a blame game. That is a very, very simple, fundamental thing to understand. The idea is not to put a surgeon down for what he did or what he did not do. And what is again important is that there may be several aspects to a case with a complication, but you must try and focus and learn in depth about perhaps the most important aspect of a given case. For example, a patient may have had a leak from an anastomosis. If you have discussed anastomotic leaks before, you would have known, you would have learned everything from the depth. But in this particular instance, it may be complicated by a DVT. So then go on to look at what is the kind of DVT situation in a potential anastomotic leak. What are the preventive methods? What are the treatment methods? What else? If you have to reoperate in a patient with a DVT, what would you do? Things like that, where features like IVC filters or short-term anticoagulation and things like that come. So there are various aspects, and always it has to be backed up by evidence. You must have papers, which invariably you will find, and discuss those issues with your in your case, along with, as I said, the references that you have. I thought Nikita had raised her hand. You want to say something, Nikita?
Yes, sir. In the previous slide, there was the last point, also staged discussion. What do we mean the staged discussion, sir?
Yeah. As I said, when you make your slide, your first few slides will be about the introduction, aims, and objectives of that given paper. Okay. Your next 3 or 4 slides will be materials and methods. And the next 3 or 4 slides will be on the results. And the final 4 slides will be on the discussion and consult and conclusions. So each of these is a phase. So at the end of your first four slides, for example, where you have looked at the introduction and the aims of the paper, then you stop and involve the audience and say, look, give me your comments about the good points up to this point in this paper and the bad points. Similarly, after that comes up, you show your own critique of that slide. And then the next 4 things will be about materials and methods, or materials and patients. So when that happens, you stop again and tell them what are the good things about the way these people have conducted the study, what are the not so good things. And so at each phase, each stage, you have a discussion on the topic. That is the stage discussion. Okay.
Okay, sir.
All right. So when you do one, you will know yourself, and your mentor will help you through that. Okay. That when you, as I said, the theory is good. I have explained it to you, but you will retain it the best when you actually do it yourself. That's a part of learning. Okay. So M&M, I think, is an excellent tool, and we use it. I'm very happy the way we use it in our group, and we have a lot of learning in M&Ms. Multidisciplinary meetings gives you a window into the working of the other departments, and I think it's a very, very important thing. MDTs in cancer surgery is very important, as we do not do too much onco surgery. We do not have MDTs, but we do have it in terms of common topics like tuberculosis. We have CPCs and the like. And this is actually driven by consultants. And even though we encourage our youngsters to, you know, conduct it themselves, in the things that we have done in the past, the youngsters conduct it. But as I said, it is driven by consultants. So whenever I have been in charge of an MDT, I have actually spoon-fed juniors to say exactly what to say, so that the discussion is under control. Otherwise, in all these multidisciplinary, specialist meetings, discussion can go tangentially, and it is very important that the seniors there control the discussion. Which tool to use? I think we have said enough about individual tools, and we have to consider certain things. I personally keep the options very, very flexible. I'm not too rigid about getting into the technicalities of the tool, as long as the information is conveyed, as long as there is participation, and as long as there is discussion. I think things will go down well. But as I said, size of the class, the topic that is concerned, the type of learners, and the resources we have are all the things that you consider. Okay, I will skip through these. But what is important is that in any lecture, we have to break the monotony. If you keep on talking, everybody will be sleeping. And even if their eyes are open, that they will not be listening to you. And even if they're listening to you, they'll not be registering what you're saying. So it's always important that you must keep something curious going, either in your slides or in the way you talk, and always break the monotony by giving surprises, like I do with Pawan, poor chap, huh? Pawan. So say something, ask something, and then people wake up a little bit, hopefully. Okay, so that is all about the conventional methods. Unconventional methods, I'm still within time. I will talk for about 5 minutes, and I would like comments at the end of this section. I would like all the students to say what they feel, what they would prefer in all these methods, so that in the coming year we can incorporate that kind of teaching to maximize their learning experience. Unconventional can be anything, but I have only listed a few that we have been doing in the past few years. One of them is giving comments on email answers. So as I said, this was sent to me. For example, these are all screenshots from my computer, sent to me by somebody who has typed the answer in. And I have always said it's better that you write it in, so that you do not lose the practice of writing. And here our comments will be, will come as any other comments in for a given document. Okay. And at the end, after individual comments, I usually put something like this, good coverage of information. Always write in flowing textual English and underline important points. This is true for all theory questions. If you've written a long paragraph, the examiner will not read every line of it. So if you underline certain things that you think are important, then that would grab his attention. You already have experienced, all of you, you send your PPTs in, hopefully 3 to 4 days in advance. And if you do that, we always correct it and send it back to you. And corrections are always, given by slide numbers, or actually we correct it on the slide itself and send it back to you. We also, this is one of my favorites, as you have already discovered, either on email or on the WhatsApp. I keep sending you references. I only hope you read them. That is the important thing, because what reference, sending reference like this achieves is that you're not wasting time on finding a reference. We will be scouting the literature. We are quite, we are quite experienced in getting the right sources quickly, and also selecting the articles that we find that we feel would be useful to you, so that your effort is only in reading rather than having to search for this. This is something which I think you guys must use often. And this is when you have a clinical case or a challenge or something that you do not know. It is not wrong to look at the reference right then and there. You have so many sources. Make sure that those sources are peer reviewed. Don't just put a regular Google search on a regular search engine. Search on Google Scholar, search on PubMed Central, search on Medscape. These are all peer reviewed sources. So if you do those, then you will learn much better. And we can do this in teaching sessions also. The knowledge is so vast that none of us, with all our reading, cannot remember everything and remember everything correctly. So if I have no hesitation, if I'm taking a class, if I don't know something, I'll say I don't know, and then and there I ask somebody to look it up, and then we can all learn. And as I said, this kind of immediate feedback, including a feedback to the teacher, will result in the best form of learning and retention. That is very important. Then and there, if you check and see and look for an answer, then it's important. And obviously, if you want to have a point of care reference, you need to have a good internet connectivity and access to data. But these are not disadvantages anymore, because all of us have net enabled phones, for example. And infographics are very, very important nowadays. If you see the BMJ, I suggest that you see the British Medical Journal regularly. Every week that it comes out, it'll have some infographic on something important, not always surgical, but many times very useful for surgeons also. You'll have nice infographics, and it's good to have them so that you get a very visual knowledge. And as I said, you can retain these much better than just textual knowledge. And you can have talks which we put on the YouTube, for example. All these are recorded and put on the YouTube. It need not even be a Zoom meeting. You can talk on various topics. I have a topic like this called CPD on the net, and you have skill teaching videos. You have so many things. You learn on YouTube, Lab Surge, and various other archives, various sites you can see to see what kind of skills, how others are doing a given operation. There's always something new to learn. There's always something new to learn there. The only downside is that these are not peer reviewed. They may not necessarily be world standard, but if you go to a site which is a very well-recognized site, a world-renowned hospital, for example, then it is most unlikely that you will get something which is incorrect. So going on to YouTube or Lab Surge and things like that, surgical quiz is another non-sequential learning exercise. All right. And you can even have it, I've designed it on PowerPoint itself. It can automatically give you a feedback and give you your score as well. And so that is something that's important. And you can design on PowerPoint learning problem-based modules like this. I won't go into the details of this, but you have a problem, can you can discuss 2 or 3 aspects of it, and you can have a multimedia file on it. You can have a text file, you can have a sound file, you can have a picture, you can have a movie. And I've done one of these patients with an RUQ, right upper quadrant pain, for example. And in the history, for example, I have a recording of an actual patient describing her biliary colic, in her own words, in her own language. So you can have the kind of impact that teaching will have when you listen to 4 different people describing a biliary colic. So it's a great tool for learning, and that can all be done, but this is very, very time and resource intensive. And when you have a right upper quadrant pain, every kind, hepatic pain, acid peptic disease, you can have all these things described in different ways. And this is my last slide, which actually included only yesterday. And I sent some of these things to you today. This is the latest, and I think this is probably be a disruptor. That is a popular word that most people have. This is what's called Chat GPT, which is an AI, artificial enabled chat bot. You've all heard about bots where they do different things in groups. So you can get into this and put any search term, and it'll give you a lot of nice information about it. It can write poetry. I saw Chat GPT write a poetry on COVID-19, very impressive poetry. And I I just out of curiosity asked it what cybergogy is. Cybergogy is basically e-learning, everyday, net-based or e-learning. And so what the problem that this has now is, if I give you guys an assignment on biliary colic, you might ask Chat GPT what biliary colic is and cut and paste it and send it back to me. So the problem that teachers now have is trying to see how we trained analytical thinking among students. Okay, the important thing for all of us as teachers and all of you as learners is to analyze a situation, have facts, even if you don't remember all the facts. As I keep saying, I squirm when people ask you what is stage 4A or what is the difference between stage 3A and stage 3B of something, because I don't remember those things. And so, I don't expect you to mug up, but all I want you to know is that that particular staging table is available at a particular place. You look at it, and once you do that, then you have to realize, you have to analyze and see what is best for your patient. That includes not just the stage, the person's physical condition, emotional condition, financial condition, social condition, everything has to be put in. And that's what makes you a good surgeon. So I think that whatever tools that you have, AI or otherwise, that your human factor and your analytical thinking will always come in handy, and that we as teachers must focus on harnessing that potential and teaching you how to analyze a given situation, not just making you mug up and regurgitate in an examination. Thank you very much. I hope this has stimulated you guys to do some learning about learning itself and about teaching. And now I invite comments from the students to tell me what they think would be a good tool for them to learn surgery. Thank you. Nikita, you start.
Sir, I think each tool is very useful in its own way. So alternating the tools just as we have now in our curriculum might be the whole effective approach, sir.
All right. Praveen.
The same thing, sir.
Praveen, your voice is breaking.
Including all the approaches. Hello, sir. Audible, sir.
Yeah, there's some disturbance also.
Sir.
Go on, Praveen, tell me now.
Emergency, sir, on
Is there somebody talking in the background?
Sir,
Praveen, go on.
in the emergency, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, if
including all
leave it.
the-
If you're in the emergency, leave it. Leave it. Yeah. Nishant, your comments.
Yes, sir. So like Nikita said, it should always be a combination of all the tools. And of course, because they are in the stage where they need to learn a lot more, so most of it should be PG oriented, or they should take a major chunk of participation so that they, while preparing, they tend to learn a lot.
All right, Pooja.
Sir, I had missed out in the beginning part, but
All right.
from how much I have heard, sir,
Yeah.
I think the approach we have here is much better than what was there for us, because we have journal clubs and we have faculty lectures, and most of the like approaches that we are using here is much informative, and it helps us retain better, sir.
What is your
That's
favorite
what I
tool?
find.
From what we described, what is your favorite tool?
Sir, I think group discussions were good,
Group
sir.
discussion.
One of the group discussion was very good because um, we have inputs coming from everybody and the thoughts, and everybody has like, so yeah, I think group discussion was one of the
All right.
best
Vinod.
things.
Hello, sir. Am I
Yeah.
audible, sir?
Yes, you are.
Sir, I feel group discussion is better for me, sir.
All right. I think Abdul has left, has he? Yeah, he must have left. I can't see him in the list. Niranjan? He also seems to have left, right? Okay, final comments from Ravi before we close.
Yeah, as usual, excellent lecture, sir. I think
Thank you.
very power packed, and I think a lot of information. My own take on this is that, as you said very rightly, the entire onus on how to learn should come from the student. So they
Agreed.
have to initiate. And for example, when you have seen an interesting case, come and, I think all of us are available. And then I just start talking and asking questions. And why did you do this? I told them, I think you can ask me question, why did you do this? Why not that? And I will not take it as an insult or anything. I will, tell my point of view. It may not be the right point of view, but it is my point of view. So I think that kind of open ended discussions and open-minded, discussions is very important. I think every tool has its own value. I think the thing which you learn most from is from mortality morbidity meetings and group discussions which we've had, and I think they have been very, very useful. Journal club, of course, for a systematic learning of a particular topic. And thank you very much, sir. I think it was
Thank you very much. And I want youngsters to really think about these things and make it worthwhile for all of us as a group to make learning surgery a pleasurable experience. That's important. It's not enough that you don't go through learning to pass an exam or do something like it. It should be something that all of us enjoy doing, and it is possible if all of us put our minds to it. Okay, thank
So
you.
there one
Yeah.
information I have to give. Ajit has
Please.
got into MCH urology.
Yeah.
Our student. It's very good news for all of us, and congratulations to Ajit. And he
Congratulations to
told
him.
me that Harshal is doing very well. He is now teaching MS student. He's lecturers and assistant professors.
Very
So it's good that people who have learned and been taught here are going out and doing
going
good things.
places. Very, very
And
nice.
in our Gurukula system, there was the same thing what you have put out in the New England Journal of Medicine. It's called the Shravana Manana Nididhyasana. I think that is the same principle,
Correct.
which is now sort of given a different this one I think heading.
Correct. All
Thank
right.
you, sir. Good
Okay.
night.
Good night. Good night.